Spark Yarn. Spark Yarn has the characteristics of it is compatible with Hadoop by using Yarn to run Hadoop clusters. And once again, Hadoop is the original big data technology that was widespread, being one of the world's most famous and dominant technologies for its own period of time. And therefore, it is so widely spread that a lot of HDFS databases still exist over many places. And that's why using Yarn to access the HDFS database such that data can be analyzed on Spark is so attractive. So this part is really important. Spark can process data on any Hadoop input format, so it's great, including HDFS, HBase, Cassandra, Hive, and other things. There is a client mode of Yarn. The driver program of the application runs on the client computer. That's why it's called client mode. The Yarn Resource Manager, YRM, selects a node with sufficient resources and makes a request to the node's Yarn Node Manager to set up a Yarn App Master. The Yarn Resource Manager has an Apps Master, which is in control of multiple app masters. In other words, the Apps Master in the YRM is going to monitor and provide failure recovery when it happens of multiple YAMs. The YAM makes a request to the YRM to have multiple Yarn containers with executors to be set up in the cluster. The YRM informs the YAM which nodes have sufficient resources to set up the containers and sends the required information to the YAM to enable the setup process. The YAM makes a request to the YNMs to set up the containers, the Yarn containers on the nodes. Inside each Yarn container, an executor is set up to process tasks on the RDD partitions. The client can use the driver to be directly interactive with the executors in the Yarn containers on the nodes. The client can check the results of the transformations and the actions in the executor in real time using the driver interface in client mode. So once again, the driver is on the client's computer. There are two-level schedulers that are being controlled. The YRM scheduler decides which nodes have containers to run the executor JVMs. The drive scheduler decides the actual task that will run on each executor. The drive scheduler attempts to optimize the task assignment based on the cached RDD dataset stored on each node. Spark Yarn client mode process will end when a driver program is closed. When a client driver shell is terminated, then it will close. Or for another example where the client actually just closes its computer, ends its computer and takes it away, then the client mode will be terminated. Now let's check this process in animation through an illustration of procedures. First, the driver on the client computer sends to the Yarn Resource Manager. The Yarn Resource Manager, the YRM, sets up a Yarn App Master, YAM, on one of the nodes. Then the Apps Master will monitor the Yarn App Master that was set up in case a failure occurs. Then a Yarn container request is sent from the YAM to the YRM, the Resource Manager, and the Resource Manager sends back the container setup information. Then the App Master, the YAM, will contact the Yarn node managers where the Yarn containers are set up. Within the containers, there is an executor which will execute the RDD using tasks to get the child RDD results. The driver is in control of the executor programs that are running on the Yarn containers. So therefore, If the driver is turned off, then the connection will be lost and the operation will be terminated that was running on the cluster. Let's look at the cluster mode example. In a cluster mode, the client submits the app and the driver program to the cluster's resource manager. And this is where the YRM is now in charge of the driver program itself. And the driver program is no longer being executed from the client computer. That's why we call it cluster mode, because the driver program is now in the cluster. The RM, the resource manager, the YRM, decides the location of where the Yarn App Master, YAM, will be located. Then the Apps Master will monitor the YAM to make sure that it's running well, and in case a failure will occur, then the Apps Master will provide a backup and failure recovery. The YAM starts to execute the driver program internally on the cluster on one of the nodes. The YAM makes a request to the RM, the YRM, to have multiple containers with executors set up to work in the cluster. The RM informs the YAM which nodes will be sufficient to open new containers and execute your operation. Then the YAM makes a request to the NMs to set up containers on their nodes. Inside each container, Yarn container, an executor is set up to execute tasks on the RDD partitions. The result is saved to HDFS or to Cassandra or to something else. Then the client can come later and check the results that are saved on HDFS or in Cassandra or some other place. Let's look at this operation of the cluster mode in animation. Here we go. The driver contacts the resource manager of Yarn, the YRM, and the YRM will set up a Yarn App Master. And then the Apps Master will start to monitor the YAM to provide its backup capability in case a failure occurs. Then the driver that is on client 1 will be moved into the Yarn App Master and the connection can be disconnected. Then client 1 can leave. It can close up its computer and come back and check later. Then the Yarn App Master will send a Yarn container request to the resource manager and it will get container setup info. Then the App Master will contact the node managers to set up Yarn containers. And in these containers there will be an executor that runs the RDD tasks. Now the driver will continuously monitor and communicate with the Yarn containers. When the client returns and wants to check the results, then it will contact the driver that's on the Yarn App Master, the YAM, and that will check the results on the Yarn container. It may also have saved the final result on HDFS or on Cassandra or some other place where the driver will go and fetch that and report it to the client device. This is cluster mode. These are the references that I use and I recommend them to you. Thank you.